Hi everyone, I'm Daniel, and today I have something extra special to talk about the solar eclipse that's happening. If you're not totally sure, there is a big solar eclipse happening through North America, starting in Mexico, all the way through the United States and up through Canada. And it's going to be really exciting. A total eclipse is something that doesn't happen all that often, but you know when it sometimes happens? Arkham Horror, the card game, as you can see here in the background art, which is from the box cover of the Innsmouth Conspiracy. Sometimes eclipses happen as part of the story, and it represents cultists and other nefarious beings advancing towards their agenda. This is not going to be a hard-hitting analysis video. This is just going to be a silly look at some of the cards that are eclipse themed throughout the campaigns that we have. So a few spoilers for each campaign that has an eclipse showing up in some way, shape, or form. So I'll be talking about just what I think of the cards and maybe something about the theme. Let's go ahead and start with something from the Innsmouth Conspiracy itself. Title alignment. As you can see in the background of the art there, the eclipse is happening. And there's lots to do with like the movement of the moon and tides and flooding and whatnot, right? So it makes sense that this campaign has this as part of the theme. Flooding tends to be something really bad, right? If you've played the scenarios, you don't want your locations to flood, and tidal alignment makes sure that maybe at least one location gets flooded, and then you take some damage. Tough card, it just kind of happens. Increasing the flood level is maybe potentially dangerous, but if you actually can't flood a location anymore, then it gains surge. All right, that's that one, the first one. The next one is from the Scarlet Keys, Tenous Eclipse, and this one happens in a few different scenarios, but only one scenario, Dealings in the Dark, really has anything to do with an eclipse. It's in the art here, but there's not really a whole lot about eclipses, even in that scenario. We'll talk about it more on the next card that talks about Dealings in the Dark. Anyway, this one you put next to the agenda deck, and no more than one concealed mini card can be exposed by each investigator each round, and at the end of the round, discard one copy from play. Well, this is a super soft card. The scenarios in which it does appear, sometimes you don't even get concealed mini cards every round, so this is just a totally blank encounter card. So a fine card for when it becomes scary, but usually it's just some filler. Next up, this is from the Dream Eaters, and this one's called Dreamlands Eclipse, which is a little funny because in at least a few scenarios, maybe one scenario that you see it in, you're actually on the moon, and usually the moon is what blocks the sun during an eclipse. So maybe here the Earth is blocking the sun. I don't know. That seems like it's possible. I think this also happens in other scenarios where you're not on the moon, so I guess it's a regular eclipse then. You put it next to the agenda deck, just like the previous card we saw. When you initiate an investigation, you must either take one horror or your location gets +2 shroud for this investigation. Easy to forget this. It's also a super soft card. I think it's a little bit more troubling than the previous card, but honestly, you could usually take one horror. What's annoying is if you're investigating for like 4 actions in your turn, that's a +1 horror for, you take 1 horror for every time you investigate. So this is where you want to like throw your deductions or use your fingerprint kit or something like that instead. So you only get the initiation once. End of the round, get rid of it. Maybe just don't investigate that round. Next up, back to Innsmouth. This is Syzygy, which is part of the same encounter set. You can see the encounter set icon right in the middle of your screen is the art, which is the same art on the box. Anyway, Syzygy is it's a cool word to say, right? It's one of those you must decide, choose one encounter cards where it's peril, so you don't get any help on deciding from your friends, and you must choose something that changes the game state. So losing 3 resources, or everyone takes 2 horror, or place 1 doom on the current agenda, which causes the current agenda to advance potentially. Notably, if you're not sure of the rules here, you have to choose something that changes the game state, but it doesn't have to fulfill everything. In other words, that first option, losing 3 resources. If everyone has 3 resources, everyone loses 3. If one person has 1 resource and 2 people have 0 resources, you can still choose this option. one person lost a resource, that changes the game state, totally fine. If no one had any resources, you can't choose the first one. I think it's a tough card. It's neat. I usually choose the taking two horror because the way that I play, I tend to not want to lose resources. Three is an awful lot in my opinion. Unless it's like later in the game and everyone has like a million, then it's not a big deal. But usually I just go with the horror. Okay, back to Scarlet Keys. This is back to Dealings in the Dark. This enemy, the Umbral Harbinger, which Umbral, if you didn't know, refers to the shadow, right, that happens during the eclipse. Any shadow, I suppose. So yeah, this guy's showing up during the eclipse. 3 fight, 5 health, 1 evade. Enemy, it's got Hunter. Forced, when Umbral Harbinger is dealt damage, place 1 doom on the coldest enemy nearest to it. Yeah, so every time you deal it damage, as separate instances anyway. So it's kind of like the previous thing we were talking about with the initiating investigations. Only 1 doom if you deal it like 3 damage at once. But if you like do 2 damage with your weapon and 1 damage with the beat cop, that's 2 separate. And the doom in the scenario, I believe, is giving clues to the cultists. I think that's how this one works. So it's a neat enemy. Really speeds things up in terms of the cult getting to its objective, which is, I guess, the whole point of these Eclipse-related cards, right? A lot of them are pushing forward the agenda in some way, right? Even placing 1 doom on the agenda in the previous card is kind of like that too. You see the eclipse in the art, right? You get the neat moon blocking out the sun. This scenario has a point in which you are there's an eclipse going on, I guess, and it goes away once you finish the scenario, which is interesting. And I think when you advance the agenda, like every time you do it, you have to like put a resource token on the agenda as an eclipse token. But honestly, like the story has very little to do with the eclipse. It's just that you are dealings in the dark, is the darkness is the eclipse itself. Flavor text here also seems to refer to darkness, so I guess. Let's move on. Hey, this card's just called Eclipse. This is from the standalone scenario Guardians of the Abyss. Actually, that's 2 scenarios in 1 pack, but it's in, I think, both of the scenarios. And I don't remember there being an eclipse in the story, but this card is just called Eclipse. Test 3 willpower. If you fail, you must either take 2 horror or choose an ally asset at your location to be defeated and taken by the Abyss. Probably don't do that. The Abyss is scary. I won't say anything else unless you happen to play the scenario, which you should. It's a fun one, but really a tough one. You could play this as a standalone or insert it into a campaign of your choice, which if you're going to do that, make sure you have enough XP. All right. Oh, hey, this is an agenda card, also from a standalone scenario called Carnival of Horrors, and I did not remember that this scenario had anything to do with an eclipse, but here it is. Again, one of these things where you're in Venice, and all the cultists are chanting and whatnot, and they're revelers, I suppose, trying to summon an Ancient One during an eclipse. There's the eclipse on the art. And I guess that's just sort of, again, a similar thing we've seen all along with during an eclipse is a good time to summon an Ancient One. It's called Blood Eclipse. I guess I had to include it, right? There's a level 3 version. There's a level 1 version that's pretty similar. I don't know what this has to do with an eclipse, but here it is. You get to fight using willpower instead of combat. You get to take some damage for it. You get to do extra damage depending on how much damage you took. Neat card for Calvin Wright. Maybe Vincent Lee can take the level 1 version. I don't know why he'd want to do that, but something you could play as a guardian that might have better willpower instead of combat. Yeah, I just threw in a player card for fun. And let's finish things up by looking at the player card back itself. We don't usually look at the player card back in so much detail, but I think there's an eclipse going on here, right? It seems to be several celestial bodies blocking out the sun. There's a bunch of tentacles here. If you haven't seen the high-res version of the player card back or haven't looked really carefully at your player card back, there's a bunch of tentacles in the center of that planet, though, so a little spooky. That's about it for me. I just wanted to have a little silly video in theme with the solar eclipse. I hope you're going to see it in some way. If you're in the path of totality, that's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully the clouds don't block your visibility. If you're not in the path of totality, maybe you'll be able to see part of it. The moon will block out part of the sun, and if you have the eclipse glasses, you should be able to see something going on. So that's a very exciting time for those of us in North America who have some visibility. Solar glasses, that would be a fun item for a standalone or something like that that has something to do with the eclipse in Arkham Horror. All right, I'll see you next time for maybe some real analysis of cards and the campaigns and whatnot. But otherwise, I enjoyed the eclipse.